Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today's episode is going to focus a bit more on what I would refer to as the genre of your wand. When setting out to start conceptualizing the new wand that you plan to design, I think it's always beneficial with any kind of a design to think about or to do a little bit of research on what it is that you are looking to create. So we're going to be taking a look at some different types of wands that I've done my best to categorize into different themes or genres of wands. And this is different than the previous episode that had to deal with the categories, say conventional, traditional, unconventional, and feature heavy. So let's take a look.
In addition to keeping in mind the different parts of a wand and the ratios and the categories that they fall into, conventional, traditional, unconventional, and feature heavy, a third aspect to keep in mind is genre or theme. Now, there may be more than the ones that I'm going to mention. In fact, I'm sure that there are. I have lists of other ones around that I've kind of been coming up with. But for the purposes of this episode, we're just going to focus on 5. Art Deco. Okay, so think Fantastic Beasts. Think high class, elegant, gold embellishments, and or gems, jewels, or other fancy embellishments. That, sleek and sort of overall simple. For the most part, it may fall into kind of the traditional, conventional style a lot of the times. Of course, there's exceptions to all, but for the most part, Art Deco is very high-end, elegant looking. And you can do a search online for just Art Deco, and you can see the different types of architectural and fashion design and things like that of that era, and get an even better understanding of what it is that I'm talking about. Another category is, say, more like ancient wands. So ancient wands, they, for the most part, think very primitive, or simple design. Now, simple doesn't necessarily mean like not sophisticated in its approach. The idea is to create depth and visual interest, but make it look simple. Ancient designs, again, think very primitive, simple, wands that may reflect a specific ancient culture, and or just aesthetic. Their tools or weapons, for example. Ancient can be, this was, think primitive, ones that may reflect ancient culture and their tools and or weapons. These can include twine, or leather wraps, furs, or just wood stained to look old and aged. No color paints really used on these more primitive looking wands. Now, that's not to say that you can't use paint or wood burning techniques to create visual interest. We'll get into some of that later. But for the most part, these more ancient looking wands, kind of simple, but can still be made to look interesting. Another category would be rustic. Somewhat similar to ancient in the sense that they are simple designs, lacking any gaudy embellishments. Unlike ancient, rustic can include metal detailing. Rustic wands may be more complex in their design than ancient wands. Harry's wand. Harry's wand, for example, I think that you could consider to be a rustic design. You could also maybe argue kind of ancient, but well, here's this one down here, for example. This, to me, I would put more in like the ancient category. Okay, it almost looks like it was just broken off from a tree, and it's got some aged, what I refer to as like a wounded part of the branch right here. And then, the artist, he refined it a bit more. It's not, you don't need to have it bulky and weird and lacking detail for it to be like an ancient themed wand. This would be another great example of what I would consider to be kind of like an ancient wand right here. This one as well, the middle one. The top one here, maybe not so much. Maybe though, I see kind of like when I first looked at it, I thought I saw like a dragon's face or something, almost like what was his name? Valcor, was that his name from the Neverending Story? But it might just be like some like twisted, aged branch right here. So all of these, I'd say, are pretty good examples of what would fall into the realm of like an ancient looking wand. Rustic though is a bit more refined, and this would be another example of what I would consider to be like an ancient style wand. Now there was silver paint used in this on some of these areas to try to accentuate the idea of it being charred, and it was charred, it was wood burned, but with some of the silver paint that is dry brushed onto it, it gives it a little bit more of that ashed kind of look to it. So again, certain techniques involved with elevating some designs and making certain details pop. So ancient and simple doesn't necessarily equal simple, if that makes sense. Let's see. We will move on to the next category, which be whimsical. So for me, this is sort of like a rustic, I don't know. I think it has a little bit of the whimsical kind of element to it. I used some modeling moss that I glued down to the handle here to create the idea that moss was growing on it. And so it has a little bit of that fun to it, but whimsical really is anything that twists and bends and includes strange details within the design. So Harry's wand could also be considered whimsical due to the fact that it is made to look a little bit like a miniature tree trunk, which makes his wand technically kind of a rustic, whimsical themed wand. I would also include this one as a sort of whimsical. It's a little bit weird. It's in the unconventional category, but it looks kind of like a worm or a larvae or something along those lines, or just an undefined thing, but definitely has more of a whimsical strangeness to it, in my opinion. It's not really a category I was going to talk about today as far as like nature, like a nature category / theme, but this flower wand definitely kind of falls within like the nature inspired theme, but could be considered a little whimsical as well. All right, so the last category, which is modern / kind of like industrial or something along those lines, and these are all kind of loose, so that I came up with these on my own just to kind of help me when designing a wand. Like asking myself, what do I want this to be? Do I want this to be whimsical? That you could see someone like Slughorn or something, wielding, or kind of a modern, more contemporary design. This wand here I would kind of consider to be almost more of like a rustic, modern hybrid, just due to the overall shape of the wand, some of the burning on it, the flat aspect. It's not like it's not what I would consider to be like a super polished, refined, modern wand. Like modern wands often, but not always, include embellishments of a variety of materials: leather, metal, furs, glass, stones. These wands may be a bit more abstract at times, which to me this is a bit more abstract, or could be elegant and highly polished in their appearance. One of the things that for me makes this seem a little bit more of like a modern style wand is the inclusion of these brass tubes right here that I drilled into the wood and glued in these brass tubes that go through the wand. Similarly, or much like this wand here, this wand I would consider to be very much a modern style wand, very unconventional wand, almost a pommel heavy wand because the features are so skewed. However, it's not held back here by the pommel. It is held, with just these kind of two fingers here, and The pommel does kind of rest in the meat of the hand a little bit, but it's definitely held by the handle here. But again, if you look at the blade length on this, the ratios, I mean, this is probably like 30%, like pommel, handle, guard is probably about 25 to 30% of the overall length of the wand, and the rest of it's blade. So you're starting to see where you can take the parts of the wands, the ratios, the categories, such as conventional, traditional, unconventional. I would consider this to be a very unconventional wand, both in shape, which is asymmetrical, and the fact that there's these holes that are drilled into it, and then you have the glued in copper tubing, which in my mind kind of makes it more of like a modern aesthetic. The inclusion of these metal tubes that run through. So that's going to wrap us up for the different genres.
So moving out of the genres and into like the inspiration phase. Okay, so we've looked at kind of like the wand anatomy, the pommel, the handle, the guard, the blade. We've looked at some of the different categories, the traditional, conventional, unconventional, and feature heavy. We've looked at some of the genres that, when setting out to create your wand, what kind of genre do you want it to fall in, or theme? Do you want it to be kind of a high class, high end Art Deco, or like an ancient kind of feel to it? Maybe a somewhat rustic vibe, whimsical. I'm sure there's a fair amount of the Harry Potter wands that would fall within whimsical, certainly as like a hybrid of something else, and then like modern. So moving on to the inspiration phase, before we get to the actual sketching out of your wand, now that you know what theme interests you, and you don't have to be limited to just one, you can begin looking at things online or just in the world around you for inspiration. Look at things you see in nature, at your home, hardware store, or a craft store. Both in hardware stores and craft stores, if you look in specifically at the hardware section, you will see a variety of small knobs that you can attach to your wand's pommel area, and I'll address that in a later episode on exactly how to fasten the hardware to your wand in a strong and sturdy manner, so it's not like you're just trying to glue it onto the end or something, so that it actually stays on there. So again, when looking for inspiration for your wands, keep your eyes open. Look at nature around you. Take a look on Pinterest. There's a variety of things out there that you can look at. Look at like fire pokers. Look at ornate handles. Look at other wands. Of course, always look around at other wands. Don't just straight out copy somebody else's wand. But of course, if there's certain elements that you like across their work that you feel yourself kind of being pulled to, you can of course adapt some of their style or certain aspects of things that they do in some of their wands to incorporate into your design when it comes time to start sketching them out. Do not be limited by size when it comes to finding inspiration for your wands. Look for things that are small that could be made the size of a wand. So if you find like a fancy metal cocktail like toothpick or something along those lines, take a look at that. Does it have an interesting shape? Look at all manner of things around you, and just keep yourself open to it. If you see something, try to imagine it in a larger scale, or one part of the thing that you're seeing as, say, the handle of your wand. And likewise, much larger things. Is there a building or like the column of a building that could be downsized in your mind and sketched out and be incorporated into, say, the handle of your wand, or just part of the design of your wand. So try to keep yourself open to all manner of designs and things that you see, both small and large, that you could incorporate into your design. The next episode we will be dedicating entirely to taking an in-depth look at wand silhouettes, things to keep in mind when sketching out your wands, and all the different inspirations that you've seen and all that stuff. We'll move into making sure that your wand reads from a distance, and we'll take a look at some different examples of both Harry Potter franchise and the Fantastic Beasts franchise, as well as some of the wands that I've done, as well as possibly some other fellow wand makers out there that have given me permission and allowed me to kind of pick and choose a few of their wands to use as examples. So stay tuned for that.